Hello and welcome to the Football Unravelled podcast, the podcast which seeks to unravel the murky underbelly behind the beautiful game that we all love. It's been a bit of a while since our last episode. I've been on my holidays and I've had lots of work to deal with, so it's great to finally get going again. We've got a really good episode for you today. It's highly relevant to incidents within European football over the last few weeks and months. We will be asking, what is it like to be a referee in the modern game? And we've got a really good lineup to answer such a question. We are delighted to welcome as our guest Kerry Williams, who is a referee in the National League, the Welsh Premier, and the Women's Super League. How are you doing, Kerry?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, you are a Swansea City fan, right?
I am indeed, for my sins.
Yeah, how are they doing at the moment?
Not too bad. 4 wins on the trot. We're doing
okay.
Okay,
Great. Is there a promotion? Is there a promotion push on the cards? Maybe you think?
Who knows? Who knows? We'll ask me again in a few months' time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We also have our new contributor, Jonas. How are you doing, Jonas? You're on mute, Jonas.
Sorry.
No worries, it's okay. Jonas is a colleague of mine and he's a researcher in football entrepreneurship. So hopefully he can ground the podcast in a bit of intellectualism, but he's also a coach and a former player. Are you feeling good about your pod debut, Jonas? He's on mute again. You're still on mute, Jonas. There we go.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't press the button. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it if I manage to keep the mute button pushed off. But I'm looking forward to it. I think we have a nice topic today. So
yeah, great. Fantastic. And last but not least, joining me with the hosting duties is also my father, David Stabler. Say hello, Dad.
Hello, everybody.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Yeah, you looking forward to the rugby tonight?
No.
No.
I don't think we stand a chance. I don't think we stand a chance today. Anyway, it's just a silly game.
Yeah. All right, let's get talking then. I think we will be starting with you, Dad. I believe you have another one of your famous monologues, which should hopefully introduce us into the topic, which should cover some of the issues that we perceive exist with what it's like to be a referee in the modern game. So take us away.
Well, it's not going to be earth-shattering as monologues go. We all know what referees are. We've all had a relationship with referees down the years, whether we played the game, Sunday league, park level, higher, whether we've just enjoyed the game from the stands or on telly for years. Referees can quite literally never win, it seems to me. Every game is punctuated with decisions that should have gone the other way, decisions against our team. Most post-match interviews of managers in any game nowadays, which they always have, they always shove a microphone in front of the manager's face, and he almost always seems to have at least one complaint, even if indirectly, about decisions made against the team. Even if he puts it in the, well, I don't want to get into trouble for criticizing the ref, but sort of terms, it's still there. Referees are integral to the game itself. There wouldn't be any game at all without a neutral arbiter. So they seem to be on the end of increasing levels of abuse. Sometimes it appears physical, more often verbal or online. I mean, historically, we had the odd famous decision every year or so. And older people will remember controversial refs like Clive Thomas. You're all probably too young to remember him, but he's the one that disallowed a goal for Brazil in the last seconds of a World Cup match when the corner was taken, then he blew for full time. And he had quite a few controversial decisions down the years, but we kind of rolled with it and moved on. And people complained about that, but we didn't have the intense scrutiny of every single game every week. It was 2 games on television, and that was it. And in the social media era, it seemed, has it become worse? I don't know. The criticism of referees, in the introduction of VAR, has that made us even more critical of referees, because now every tiny little decision is forensically looked at. I mean, we've got to respect the referee campaign that the FA brought in, and even one of the ambassadors, Jermaine Genius, was tweeting a couple of weeks ago about how referees were all ruining the game. I mean, if that's somebody who's the face of Respect the Ref, then things have got really out of control. So it's a real pleasure to have a referee on the podcast to provide some perspective from behind the whistle. So welcome, Kerry. And why did you become a ref? How did you become a referee?
I think for me it was, I started very young. I was 15 when I started training to be a referee. My dad managed an under 16s football team. Their kickoffs were at 12:30, so there was always refs doing the morning games, ref doing the afternoon games, but they never had refs. And my dad's very much if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it properly sort of person. So he was like, if I've got to referee these games, I'm going to go and do a refs course. So he dragged my brother along with him because he thought it would be character building for my little brother. And I was just that really annoying older sister that went, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So just sort of tagged along. Don't think I was ever formally invited. I just took myself off and did it. And then, kind of the rest is history. It's been so that was 2009 that I started my referee's course. And then 2010, I refereed my first game. So, 13
how old
years.
Were you? Sorry, how old were you when you started the referee's course then? Well,
so I was 15 when I started the referee's course, and then I was 16 by the time I refereed my first game. So you have to be 14 to qualify as a referee.
Yeah. And do they just, when you're doing the course, obviously you're at low-level games, park games, etc. Do they just throw you out on a pitch, or is that
kind of? Yeah. So you do. Well, it's changed a little bit. When I did it, it was I think it was an 8-week course. We met every Thursday at the social club, and it was all theory. It was all laws of the game. What are the competition rules? What are the laws? What are the expectations at different level? But it was all from a textbook. The first time I ever did anything practical was when they put me in the middle of, it was an under 13s boys game, and they just went, off you go. And somebody from the local society came down and watched my first game and told me I was okay, and gave me some little pointers. But yeah, it was, you think you know everything, you've read it all in a textbook, and then you stand on a football field and nothing happens the same in every game. So aside from knowing which way I needed to put my hand up to signal a throw in, I think I made most of it up. And the only thing I can remember about that entire game was that about 5 minutes from the end, I gave a corner when it should have been a goal kick, and a parent told me that I was the worst referee they'd had all season.
Oh God!
And I remember just thinking, okay.
I'd imagine that sticks with you a lot at that age as well, but also probably builds you a lot of resilience. You probably have heard that kind of stuff a lot in your career as a ref. But yeah, to get that at 15, that's difficult. Really, that is difficult. But yeah, more power to you for kind of standing up for yourself and that. So what's like your relationship with football now? Then you've obviously grown up and as a referee as well as a fan. So what is your relationship with football? How do you watch football? And do you think that your experiences as a ref ever impact the way that you actually interact with football, or just watch it as a fan, or even just watching Swansea?
Yeah, definitely. I think, when I first started going to the Swans when I was young with my dad, we had season tickets, and I think if at sort of 13, 14, anybody had said to me, what did you think of the ref? I'd have probably been like, didn't really notice them. Because, watching the players was watching the game, other than if they'd made a dodgy decision, I might have been like, oh, they weren't very good, were they? But you don't really notice them. And then as I got into it, I remember just going, but being very aware of the decisions. And like a goal would be scored, and just out of instinct, the first thing I'd do is look at the assistant to see if the flag was in the air, which, a couple of years ago, I don't think I'd ever done. And now I'll watch games and I'm watching the referees, I'm watching the decisions more than I'm watching the actual football. It sometimes gets me in trouble at games where I'm like defending the referee, and obviously nobody wants to hear the referee being defended when they've just given a penalty against your team. And I'm like, it was a penalty, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
everyone's like, who's she?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's hard because I think even when referees get, and we do get things wrong, I'm not going to sit here today and say that we don't. I think even when we do get things wrong, or as a fan you perceive things to be wrong, I think I've become more sort of empathetic towards it, and I think I kind of try and justify their decisions a little bit. I'm like, oh well, maybe from their angle it might look like this, or they probably couldn't see that, or I can see why they've done it. And I think I probably overly try and justify the decisions that other referees make.
Football fans are very biased towards the decisions regarding their own sides and their own teams. They always view things through the prism of their own. Yeah, very much so. And I guess if you're a referee, from my understanding, referees are taught to view the game as if there are three teams on the pitch. So I guess if you are a referee, you almost then are inclined to try and back up the referee a lot more than most other fans would do, because they are biased against the referee for their own club straight away. So yeah, that's really interesting to get your insights. And you referee at a lot of different environments and different levels. So I think I got it right by saying it's the Women's Super League, the National League, and the Welsh Premier, right?
Yeah.
Those are very different environments. With you're refereeing in both men's and women's football, and you're refereeing professional levels, and you're also refereeing semi-professionals, right? Do you notice a big difference in the environments that you're refereeing in, and the differences in, say, the WSL compared to, say, the Welsh Premier? What are your experiences with that?
I think I've always said women's football and men's football are two completely different sports. The style of play, the attitudes of the players, I do think they're very different. For me, I've always kind of found that the amateur or the semi-pro clubs, particularly as a woman, have been much more of the kind of like, oh, you're our ref, we think you're going to be awful either way, so let's just crack on. Whereas kind of the more professional clubs is where I've actually had more problems. And I don't know why that is.
So I was going to ask, what sort of more problems would you get at professional clubs then? What sort of abuse do you get?
I think a lot of it comes from, at that higher level, the expectation that you're no longer a human being and you get 100% decision accuracy comes in the higher you go, because we see that on the Super League. You look at decisions that are scrutinised of why didn't they get this right, why didn't they get, but actually, you could be in that situation 100 times and you'd probably come out with 4 different decisions, just depending on what angle you looked at it, the speed of it, and it's so difficult. Whereas I think at lower levels, they're perhaps used to it, more used to decisions not going their way because they're newer referees coming through the system, and they kind of seem to be a bit more accepting. I also think, for me as a woman, it's the exposure to it. At lower levels, there are a lot more female referees. So I might be the 5th or 6th female referee they've seen this season. Whereas on the National League North, I think female assistant referees, and I might be wrong, but I think there's only 4 or 5 of us. So actually one club could see none of us in the whole season, or they could just see me. And therefore I stand out. So if I make a decision wrong, then that's it. Female referees are awful. They shouldn't be assistants at this level. Whereas, a club that's maybe got 20 females operating on their pool, they're having 4 or 5 female refs a season. If one of them makes one error, it's not such a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think it changes it. All referees get the abuse of, you're not good enough, you shouldn't be here, go to Specsavers, all the usual stuff. I think what I've always found over the years is that it's not necessarily been you're not any good, it's you're not any good because you're a woman. And actually, I'm just not any good. It's got nothing to do with me being a woman.
Isn't it that I mean, sometimes when so I was last 4 years, I was a coach in the Austrian Bundesliga, and in the training games we needed a ref, and it was always somebody from the staff. So sometimes I was the ref or the athletic coach, or sometimes another assistant manager, assistant coach. And my feeling was like, it's no matter how you decide, like 11 people are saying it's a good decision, and the other 11 is saying it's a bad decision. And we all know that negative feedback is always, even if it's in the same amount of a positive feedback, negative feedback is always coming stronger towards. So from a motivational aspect, how hard is it to, I mean, we have been talking now like the 5 minutes about criticism, abuse, stuff like this, but normally, like I know there's also some players coming to you and saying, "Hey, you did a good job, ref," and then another one is coming to you probably from the other team who lost, and they were saying, "I'm not happy with the ref today." So how hard is it for you from a motivational aspect to focus on this positive feedback and kind of thinking, okay, this negative, as you said, this negative feedback, it's kind of part of the game, no matter if it's me or no matter of my performance or if I'm a man or woman.
I think that's a big part of it for me, is that I could have been anybody and they'd say the same thing, and it's not personal to me. And I think you sometimes do get compliments, and I think you really have to try and focus on those. It's very, very easy to remember the negative stuff because it does stick. So getting those positive reports, getting good club marks, getting, the league will get emails from the clubs to say, "Oh, we had this ref today, like we thought they did really well." And I think it's just important to just save that and keep that. And when you're having those really bad days, or a game's not gone your way, that actually you can be like, well, okay, I had this game and it went really, really well. So what have I done differently today and trying to learn from it. But like you say, 11 people will love you, 11 people will hate you. That is football. It's when 22 people hate you that you've got a problem.
Have you ever had to run for your life or barricade yourself in, or is there, there are tales in various levels of referees having to put up with that sort of thing, and
yeah, I've had a couple of instances, all at grassroots level. I remember doing an under-16s boys game, and I wasn't supposed to be refereeing it. It was my brother's team that were playing, so I was just there because we were going straight from that game to go and watch the Swans. So I'd done my game in the morning, gone to watch my brother's game. No ref turned up, so my dad very kindly volunteered me to referee the game. He was like, my daughter's a referee, she's got a kit. If everybody's happy, she'll referee. Both teams agreed, so I did. I can't even remember what the decision was, but the manager came onto the pitch and was like, "This is ridiculous. Like, her brother plays for the other team. She shouldn't be reffing us. This is ridiculous." And we were like, "We know my brother plays for the other team. We had this conversation before we started. I'm not the appointed referee. If you don't want me to do it, I'll leave." So they decided they wanted me to carry on. And then I think it was just after half time, there was like a big fight, like all the boys started fighting. And I was like, I don't feel safe anymore. This isn't, I don't feel comfortable. And I remember having like half this away team like around me, just shouting things at me, like to the point where my dad and the assistant manager for my brother's team had to like fight their way through to get me out. And then I basically ended up having all of my brother's team stood round me to like protect me. And these were like 15, 16-year-old boys. I think I must have been 17, 18 at the time. I think that was the only time I've ever felt unsafe, where actually I thought this could end really badly for me. I've been in other situations where I've been physically assaulted on a football field, but it was one individual that for whatever reason, just completely saw red. And I don't think I was the target. I think he was trying to get at the player that was stood behind me, and I was just very much in the way. But he was 6'5" and I am not. And, you know, all it took was for him to sort of throw me out the way. But even in that instance, I think because it was just one player and every other person there was very much like, that's not okay, and, you know, came to support me. But yeah, it does happen. You know, I know referees who've been barricaded into changing rooms, who've had to phone the police just to get home safely. I know referees who've had their tyres done or their cars keyed like outside of grounds. And I get it. There's passion in football, and I understand that, but I don't think anybody should leave a ground feeling unsafe.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned so you brought up the misogyny of this, and I just want to cover it slightly. So you referee the WSL as well. Is that you get different abuse then because you're refereeing women footballers, so they're not going to have that little sliver of extra abuse? Surely, is it different, or is it just abuse that you get from the players?
Yeah, you still get abuse.
Yeah,
you still get abuse at the games. I think, yeah, it is different. There is less of the sexist comments. But I think the problem we face in the women's game at the moment is that because as match officials on the Super League, we're not professional. None of us are professional. We've all got full-time jobs. This is effectively a hobby. That we get a lot of backlash for that. That's very specific to us as a group, like that we're not good enough. And I don't think it ever comes to we're not good enough because we're female, but it's all very much, well, we're not as good as the men because we don't have the same opportunity as the men's. And the women's game want the Premier League match officials because they want to be at that standard, which, you know, so they should. The league has grown a tremendous amount in the last couple of years. And, you know, I can go and referee at Chelsea and then be back at work at 8 a.m. on Monday morning.
Sorry, I let Dan or Jonas ask something. It's
I was wondering, from my perspective over the last few years, we're getting to a point where we are moving from the idea that there is a level of subjectivity within the game to a point where fans want consistency and they want exact science and they want the exact right decisions all of the time, and they also want it really quickly. And I think that probably leads to increasing levels of anger and hostility towards the referees when they can't deliver that, because that's impossible. I'm just wondering if you have noticed, you know, I know that you don't work with VAR, but because of the influence of VAR in, say, the Premier League, I'm just wondering if that kind of expectation for perfection trickles down into where the levels that you are refereeing at, and perhaps maybe you have witnessed an increasing level of anger and hostility towards referees. That was a long way of me asking whether or not you have seen an increase in these kind of in this type of abuse, basically.
Yeah, I think everybody wants the referee to not be human. You know, we can't make mistakes. We need to have 100% accuracy. We need to be perfect. And it's very much once you step out onto that field and as the referee, humanity's gone. You're not a person anymore. And I think VAR is one of those things that it's had positive impacts, but also negative ones. And I think for us, what's really frustrating is that we're still getting the comments of, you know, why can't you get this right? Why can't you get this right? And sometimes you feel like saying, right, these Premier League refs who it's their full-time job have VAR, they still don't always get it right because it's so subjective. How am I, as one person stood in the middle of a field on, you know, grassroots football on a Saturday morning, meant to get everything right when 26 camera angles and 6 people can't get it right on the Premier League? because it's subjective. And it might actually be that the decision they came to is within the scope of the laws of the game and is accurate, but because it's a sliding scale, you know, Joe Blogg's public might not agree with that. I think that's the hardest thing about football, is it is so subjective. And when we talk about VAR, your intervention comes from clear and obvious. So, you know, a challenge might go in that's, you've got room of 10 people, you've got 5 of them going, that's a yellow card, and you've got 5 of them going, oh, I'd probably give red. If the on-field decision is yellow, then it's not a clear and obvious error. So just because the team it was against all want a red card doesn't necessarily mean it is a red card. And I think for us, then that becomes really challenging at a level where we don't have VAR, because the scrutiny on those decisions, and you know, I think specifically to the women's game, they're playing them in the men's stadiums. We're having the same cameras and TV exposure, but we don't have that security of VAR. So there are decisions where, yeah, okay, with goal line technology, with VAR, maybe we'd have made a different outcome, but that's not available to us. So criticising me because I don't have that technology isn't my fault. I think people forget that. They think it's our choice to not have goal line technology or to have VAR.
I think that's quite I'm sorry for some background noise. I think that's quite an interesting point, because from my perspective as a player or as a coach, with also the experience I had with the other coaches, was that we were kind of more happy with the ref when the ref showed us that he's not a machine, that he is a human. And we had some situations where we said, I mean, this was from our perspective clearly a wrong decision, and we also had you see it in video, and it would be all be finished with just one sentence from the ref saying, yeah, maybe I made a mistake in this situation. I saw it like this, and I decided like this, and then I think everybody will be happy. And sometimes the refs that I know, even on a professional level, we have the feeling they want to show a lot of confidence, and they want to show that they are machines, and they say, no, I did the right decision. And then, you know, then the emotions are getting heated up. What's your experience with this?
Yeah, I think it's really hard, because I think you get taught when you're coming through that you have to have an element of arrogance about you. You have to believe in your decisions, because you're making decisions that, like we said earlier, 11 people are going to hate, 11 people are going to love, and you have to have some self-confidence in that to be able to say, no, this is my decision, I'm sticking with it. But equally, I think I speak for most referees when I say that we know when we're wrong. And, you know, me personally, I'll more than happily hold my hands up and go, do you know what? Yeah, that one, right? Or I'll watch it back and I'll be like, I have no idea what I've seen there. But sometimes in the moment, you're so sure that you've seen something, or you're so sure, or sometimes it's just a bit of a lapse in concentration, or your brain just goes a little bit. I had a game the other week and I watched the ball bounce off the attacker's knee and go out for a throw-in. And in my head, I was like, it's a defensive ball. And then just put my flag up the wrong way. And I just went, that's not right. But because I did it so confidently, the referee who'd not seen this went with me. He was like, yeah, it's an attacking throw-in. And the defender was just looking at me, and I just went, I'm so sorry. Because, you know, sometimes you just, and I can't tell you why I flagged the wrong way. It just happens. And I think a lot of the time players think that you do it deliberately, that you do it out of spite, that you're doing it to just, you know, prove a
some
point.
sort of bias or something, which it's just human error. I mean, is there a point where we don't know what the on-field, that's how I'm sitting in the stands, or we're watching on TV, and you're the ref on the pitch, and you can hear a player nip sort of in your face all the time, maybe swearing, getting quite verbally aggressive, muttering, and then launching into a tackle which is dodgy, yellowy, borderline red. and you would give a red because of what's gone on. What I'm saying is, you're right there, and you know what his state of mind is, and whereas somebody on the telly can say, well, last week that same challenge was only a yellow, but that person the week before hadn't been doing any of that. There's no context to them having made. Is that a fair assumption that on the field you're making decisions based on your perception of the player, or does that sound a bit?
I think yes and no. I think with things like challenges, you just have to take that snapshot of the challenge itself and what boxes does it tick. But when we're looking at those challenges that in isolation isn't a yellow card, but are we doing it for like persistent infringement, because then it becomes a yellow card? And I think that's the thing that sometimes gets lost, is that that wasn't a yellow card, he's just tripped him, but actually he's made 6 fouls identical in the last 30 minutes, so actually it is a yellow card.
My perception is that we're moving into an environment where you hear all the time the phrase consistency. Fans want consistency. And you also hear all the time that fans just want the right decision. And you also hear all the time that fans don't want to be waiting 2 minutes after a goal is scored to find out that a goal is actually scored. Now, for me, none of those work together. You either want quick decisions or you want the correct decisions with the technology specifically. But I feel like we're moving to a point where we're not allowing for a referee to manage a game how they see fit. I think we spoke a while ago, and you said that the decision where you flagged the wrong direction, you then told the referee, and then maybe he then corrected it somehow by awarding a foul or something to the other team. I think we need to allow referees the right to manage a game that they see fit, and say, like the example that my dad gave, if you are watching someone getting more and more reckless during a game, and they're getting heated and they're getting angry, and you know that a yellow card isn't going to serve as a warning for them when they put in a bad challenge, and maybe a red card is necessary, you're managing the game how you see fit. But then say if someone has been behaving themselves up until that point, and that they will take a yellow card as a warning, you almost, you're giving the referee the right to subjectively manage a game. Whereas I don't know, maybe you have an opinion on this. Is consistency, the phrase that I always hear a lot, is that something that you think is actually possible within the game, or do you think that's a good thing that fans should be looking for?
I think if you want consistency, you need the same person refereeing every game.
Yeah.
That is the only way to get consistency. The law is not black and white around challenges and things like that. Offside, for being what people describe as the most complicated law, is the shortest law in the book, because it is the most black and white, because you're either onside or you're not. But player management, dissent, challenges, fouls, misconduct is also subjective. We have things that we look for that determine it. So you have careless, reckless, excessive force for foul, yellow, red. And then you have, your considerations for each of those. What's the speed? What's the intensity? What's your point of contact? What's the intent of the player? And, from one angle, it might look worse than another, or from knowing your players, I think sometimes comes into it as well. There are players that from different teams, they'll get a yellow card, because that's the type of player that they are. They will, at some point in 90 minutes, put in a challenge that is worthy of a yellow card. They'll probably only do it once, but they'll do it. And we don't go into games with preconceived ideas of who's going to get what and what's going to happen. But I think sometimes you build up this picture of teams, and for me, as an assistant, there are certain centre forwards who I hate. because they run like this, and for an offside decision, it's a nightmare. And I'm going, I don't want to do this game because she's playing and it's going to be really difficult. And you know, you'll have centre backs who you just see them going one-on-one with an attacker, and in your head you're going, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, because you know that their timing isn't always great. And yeah, I think
there's
unconscious bias in everything, isn't there? I think, like, you don't go into something with a preconceived idea. You don't go into something saying, I'm going to give a yellow to this player, I'm not going to give a yellow to this player. But as the game goes on, I think you get, well, actually, you've been doing my head in for 85 minutes. You've just put in a challenge that I could choose to manage, but actually, I'm not going to, because you've made my life difficult for 85 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's human. I think we all do that. And I think it's...
Yeah. You've touched on something as well that intrigues me. I've been watching, obviously, the Rugby World Cup, and Jonas won't really know this, but they don't play rugby much in Germany, I presume. But you can hear the refs are mic'd up at that level, and you can hear them all the time saying in a more that don't step away, don't touch it, and they're telling the players not to do something, not to do it, step away, watch it, it's not your ball yet, use it, etc. And they're constantly basically guiding the player through. If the player then infringes, then they've been told, and you can hear him all the time telling them. Is there an element of that potentially you can do in football, which is I don't know quite. It's a different game, I know.
You could tell a striker that they're offside. Maybe you could go, "You're offside.
You're going to be offside. You're going to be offside," or whatever.
It's like you'll have players like, if I'm on the line and I've got a winger and a left back coming towards me, I will constantly be like, hands down, careful, steady, and you do speak to them. And if there's a little bit of holding, but you think you can play, you'll hear referees saying, let go of it, like let her play.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's when the players don't listen that's when the foul is given.
Yeah.
But I think because we're not mic'd up, obviously the general public don't see that, and they don't always see the warnings, because sometimes it might be you've given a free kick, but the team take it quickly, so you change your run past the player and you go, I've seen that, I don't want to see any more of it, because the next time it'll be a caution. They do it 5 minutes later, ref cautions them, and the media's going, well, you didn't even warn him.
Yeah.
But actually we did, you just didn't hear it. But we can't.
So would miking up help at various levels of the game, or would that just be a Premier League type thing? Or?
I think the biggest problem with miking up referees is the players. The respect that there is in rugby isn't there in football. We don't have it. The language that is used on a football pitch is not appropriate for, to be mic'd up, unfortunately. And it's so hard, because the respect that we are expected to give to players, that the players don't then give back to us. There are times where I wish I'd become a rugby referee. But
yeah, that's the same in Germany. Okay.
They did an experiment. In about 1992, they mic'd up for one game, didn't they? It was Arsenal. It was an Arsenal game, and you can find it on YouTube. And Tony Adams basically haranguing the referee and telling them, "Oh, I can't remember the exact words, but it's kind of shockingly hilarious." And he was a top England international, basically just losing it because, and they only did it for that one game.
Jonas, you played at a higher level than me and my dad have played at. So how would you feel if you were going into a game as a player or as a coach managing a team of players, knowing that you're going to be mic'd up, and or that there's technology in the game that could manage the game? Is that something you would be supportive of, do you think?
I think I can remember one situation when I was a player. The ref came to me and said, when you're a good player, you get up now. So this was kind of situation where he said, he was like, I was like laying on the ground. I was getting fouled, and I said, it's hurting. I need a second to get up. And he said, if you're a good player, then you get up and you don't lay on the ground like this. So at this situation, maybe the ref was happy that he was not mic'd up, because if I would tell that to him, something like this, I would straight get a card. I think maybe even a red one. I think that it's already a kind of problem, I would say. Are there the microphones at the side of the game? There are the microphones next to the fourth referee. There are microphones, and you can hear a lot. And I know some coaches that get into trouble because of these microphones, because you're not always aware that where on the pitch you need to be, and how are you how are the others able to listen to you. And there's another thing, it's maybe gets a little bit forgotten here, is that you also talk on the pitch about tactical stuff. You also talk with the players as a coach, with the players about tactical stuff. You coach a lot, and this is maybe information you don't want to be available for the public.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's kind of, if you're mixed up, it's kind of I think there's kind of a transparent line about how do you say it, of your intimate sphere, and they don't want to get into it, because then if you're mixed up, then maybe better would be like having the option to turn it on, then say something.
Because all of our communications are recorded from games.
Right.
So all of our comms are recorded. So Super League games, Football League, Premier League. So we have access to those recordings back afterwards. And I don't know if you saw it last year, Sky did a documentary on a Chelsea women's game. Where we were mic'd up. So Emily Heaset was the referee, and myself and an assistant called Georgia Ball was on the other line. And, you know, I think it was really good, because you saw some human in it. Erin Cuthbert goes in for a challenge, and Emily, the referee, goes, watch her, she loves a challenge. She is one of those players that, you know, you get to know.
Yeah.
We got quite a lot of criticism for that, because they're just expecting her to make a yellow card challenge. Whereas Erin actually retweeted the particular clip and just put, yes, I do. Knows, you know, and it's not Emily saying, I'm going to caution her for this. It's Emily saying, we know her timing isn't always great. Just make sure someone just leaves an eye on that when the ball goes, because we need to make sure it's okay. And then, you know, there are times where they have the comms and it has worked, but I think even when we're doing things well or having good conversation, somebody will not like what we say.
It would add an extra layer of scrutiny to referees, and they're already there's a lot of talk at the moment about releasing the recordings for specific games for VAR, and Jonas, you may not have seen this because it was a Premier League game. I don't know how much you keep up with the Premier League, but a few weeks ago there was a game in which the VAR officials flagged the goal as
Liverpool? Jürgen Klopp was there.
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
Of course, yeah.
It was a big thing, and they released the recordings, and then people are now kind of dissecting those recordings. And one of my favorite quotes from the recording is where he goes, good process there, lads. And then they realize they've made a mistake. But I think the issue with the scrutiny that they're putting under referees at the moment is that if they have a bad performance, they then don't get the high profile games for another few weeks or months. And people are already scrutinizing them so much with the technology and everything available on TV and everything. And it's an extremely stressful job. And I actually wonder if we're harming officiating by scrutinizing. Like, I feel like in my job, I make mistakes frequently. And if I were to know that there was 100,000 people watching me do my job all the time, the whole world watching me, I'd probably make more mistakes because I'd be so nervous. So I'm just wondering, do you think that we're actually harming our officiating by scrutinizing them and putting them under so much pressure? I think we should be allowing referees the flexibility of actually making a mistake. But
yeah, and I think that's human nature. You get something wrong, you have the same situation 2 weeks later, you're going to overthink that decision. And I think sometimes it's really important for us as match officials to understand, why did we get that wrong? What do we need to do better next time? Is it a positioning thing? Is it a communication thing? Is it just that our process and our decision making wasn't, as good as it should have been? But yeah, I think the more scrutiny there is and the more that you see, the harder it becomes to get over something. In the last couple of weeks, particularly this season, the scrutiny around the women's game has been huge. And, I've made decisions that not everybody agrees with. And then 2 days later, I've just been scrolling through Twitter and there's pictures of my face and pictures of my decision and there's comments and everything. And, why do we do this? Why have we tried to be biased towards the other team? We've disallowed a goal for no good reason, and if we had technology this wouldn't have happened, and the officials at this standard aren't good enough, and all of those sorts of things. And it is really hard to park that and move on and to process that, particularly when on the day you made the decision that you thought was the right decision. So yeah, I think the more scrutiny, the more camera angles, the more social media that gets around a decision, the harder it is to move on from that decision. And I do think it sticks with you. And nobody talks about it when it's right. And I think that's the worst bit. If I'd have got that decision right, as difficult as that decision was, other than maybe the observer who might have given me a slightly better mark, nobody would have even been talking about it. They'd have just gone, oh yeah, that team scored a goal. And that would have been it. So
it also, there's that standard phrase, referees are getting worse, which you've commented on. And yet most games for the previous 100 years were not televised. Nobody knows what the decisions really were.
Statistically, referees are making less mistakes year on every year. So but I think I think there's data to say that most people actually perceive that refereeing is getting worse when it statistically is getting better.
And I think a lot of that.
I think it's not even about the mistakes. I'm sorry, Carrie. I think because, as I said, when I was refereeing in the training game, and I did a call, and everybody was like, "Yeah, that's a red call. It's a foul." You have 4, 5, 6 players. They shout at you. They have so much pressure, so much emotion in them. They're just starting to get kind of negative. And I was like, I'm not even a coach. I'm not even a ref. I'm a coach. I just saw it. Just thought, okay, this might be the right decision. So it's also hard if you're the margin as a player and as a coach. It's so small to make mistakes. You have a lot of pressure, and then it's kind of hard to say, okay, ref, you did. I mean, the whole stadium saw it, but it's okay if you make a mistake. Then if there are situations 50-50, most of the players or coaches, they will probably say they will get angry maybe, and a few seconds later they will say, okay, you did. But with really, really big decisions like in Liverpool, then it's hard for the players and the coaches, the people inside. I mean, the people outside, we can talk about that, but the people inside, for them, it's really hard to say, yeah, it's okay, everybody makes mistakes, because if you make a mistake like this with having outcome on the play, you get a lot of trouble.
So I think that's where it kind
the
of
emotion
for us is that if your centre forward volleys it over the bar 7 times in the game, but I don't give you a penalty, you lost that game because of me.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. I like that.
That is how football is. You know, no one will look at the quality or the mistakes or the decisions of the players. They will look at that one key match incident, you know, match changing decision that the referee made. And I think sometimes that is really hard, because we do take, you know, we take that and we carry that. And sometimes if you've had a run of bad games, or, you know, social media is blown up with how awful you are, you believe that team's loss was your fault, and it's really difficult, I think, sometimes to park that. But that centre forward is gone home and is just blaming the ref because we didn't get a penalty, but actually they missed an open goal 5 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
So how do you see yourself moving forward then, Kerry? You in the game, are you working your way up still? Do you have what are your plans for the future in refereeing?
Trying to. I think the hardest thing with refereeing is that I get older and the fitness tests get more difficult, and everything's getting a bit harder. But no, for me, obviously I'm at the top of the women's game. I'm on the senior league. I'm fortunate enough to be able to travel out and do games in Europe for the women's. So for me, it's just trying to work my way through the men's game. Ideally, I want to get to the football league. That's kind of what I'm aiming for at the moment. And ultimately, I want to be in a position where this can be my job. The balance is hard.
So what's the leap now from where you are now to the football league? What extra do you have to do, or is there a process that you're following?
Yeah, so I just have to perform, really. And then so there's an observer at every game, so that's someone who comes and watches us. That we have like a marking criteria. They mark us on different areas, and then that gets put into a merit table, and then that merit table determines who gets promoted and who gets demoted. So a lot of it, obviously, it comes down to those marks. Then you've also got to pass fitness tests, your kind of admin and your availability and stuff like that all comes into it. So, you know, if somebody's reffed one game in the whole season but had a really good mark, they're probably not going to get promoted. But you know, so it's just about working hard, get the games under my belt. Hopefully, observers like me and keep kind of learning from the things they don't like.
So what's the special thing about sports and stuff I do my studies about is that it's about winning. So that's the big difference in sport entrepreneurship compared to generic entrepreneurship. In sport, it's about winning. It's not about making profits. You want to make profits, but for winning. What is the goal as a ref?
I think it's still winning. I think getting promoted is still, you know, but we always say that no matter what the outcome of the game is, that, like we said earlier, we're the third team and the third team always wins. But I think we're all competitive. Referees are all competitive. We all want to be the best. You know, nobody wants to settle for National League North on a Saturday afternoon for the rest of their career. We all want to try and get to the Football League, get to the Premier League. For some people it's attainable, for some people it isn't. But I don't know any referees who go, just stop here. You know, they're like, I could just do one more season. I'll just do one more. I'll just keep going.
I think
when you say you're the third team, do you always have the same three? Are you the same three that go to every game, and do you swap refereeing and assistant refereeing roles, etc.?
Yeah, so we're not always in the same team. The only kind of consistency I have is when I go abroad internationally, I'm with the same referee all the time. But other than that, no, it's a bit of a mix and match. The pool for the Women's Super League and for the Welsh Prem is much smaller, so I see the same referees a lot more often. Whereas on the National League, I've done 5 National League games so far this season, and I've been with a different referee on every single one of them. So yeah, it's
so are you sometimes in the middle, or are you assistant ref?
So me personally, I've specialised as an assistant, so I don't referee at all anymore. I went specialist assistant 2 years ago, But most people at my level do still do both. So they would referee at contrib level, so like Northern Premier, Southern Premier level, and then run the line at National League North and South. Whereas I just run the line at National League North and South because I wasn't very good with a whistle.
What advice do you think you would recommend to young people looking to get into refereeing? And do you think that we're facing an issue where there's so much pressure on referees that maybe we're actually preventing people wanting to get into refereeing?
I think it's really hard because all of the speculation around refereeing is the negative side of it. All you hear is a referee got abused, a referee had this happen to them, a referee got locked in the changing room, look at these terrible decisions. But I wouldn't be the person that I am if it wasn't for refereeing. I was a 15-year-old kid who got bullied and who used to just sit in the corner and didn't talk to anybody. I was very shy, very quiet. And through refereeing, I went on to, do a lot of public speaking, to take on some quite high roles when I was at uni and went through work, to now be traveling around the world with football. If somebody had told 15-year-old me that all of this was going to happen, I'd have probably laughed. I am who I am because of refereeing, because of all the skills it taught me along the way. And I think, you'll have bad games. You'll have games where you don't enjoy them, where somebody will say something, where things won't go your way. But for every one of those, there's 10 where you'll come off the pitch feeling like you've achieved something and feeling really proud of yourself. And I think sometimes I have to remind myself of that.
Yeah. I think that's the last question I was going to ask you was, how has being a referee changed your life, and whether it's made you more authoritative and stronger as a person? And you've summed that up really well. I think that's really, really good to hear your experience. I also want to say, when you do get promoted to the Football League, we will celebrate it just like any other promotion, and it will be a fantastic promotion party for sure. I think we can start wrapping up now. It's been an absolutely fantastic conversation, Kerry. It's been a real pleasure having you on. And I'd love to have you come back on for another episode at some point. We can do another refereeing special episode, or maybe a Swansea City specialist episode. I don't know, when you get promoted as well. So yeah, it's been really great. And thanks, Jonas. It's been a great debut for you as well. You got a hat trick on your debut. Looking forward to hearing more of your insights in the future. Dad, you were fine.
Fine, averagely fine.
We're still working on the next episode to our listeners. So we're still working on the next episode. We're hoping to bring on Frank from Fossil Free Football. It's an organization that campaigns to rid the sport of oil sponsorships and ownerships, as well as crowded and polluting football schedules. We haven't set a date for that yet, but we have other irons in the fire, so please subscribe and come back for more. But yeah, thank you all. Have a lovely weekend of football. And yeah, thank you, Kerry and Jonas. It's been really interesting.